Just not yet. Okay, just wait for the all clear. So Imogen and Lisa, are we good to go?
Yeah,
we are.
Yeah. That's fine.
Okay, fine. Yeah, next session, the live panel session. Thanks so much for all our speakers this morning. You'll get access to all of the presentations after the event. We'll send you through information in your inbox as to how to access those. But for now, we're gonna I'm gonna hand over to Dan Gregory from Birmingham City Council. Dan's going to be your chair for this panel session. So I'll leave him in your very capable hands. Oh no, the other way around. Leave. Anyway, whatever. Yeah. Dan, you got the floor.
I think that works better.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever. Yeah.
You leave me in their hands. Morning, everybody. Fantastic to see so many people on the call. And first of all, massive thank you to all the speakers. Some really interesting content there. And I think what's been really interesting for me over the last couple of days are the themes that keep cropping back up again, and some of those themes that run through all that we're talking about, whilst the main themes for the days for yesterday and today have been quite different, some of those same kind of subjects have been cropping up. So that's something to really probably for us to reflect on after the sessions. But so we've got a number of questions. I've certainly seen some really interesting questions coming through from everybody who's here on the session, so thank you for those. I'm sure Graham will let me know if any more come through, but I can't see the Q&A at the moment. But I think we have a lot to go at. We'll do our best to get through all the questions, but I assure you, if we don't get to your question, we will respond in some way to you at some point following the session. So, by way of introduction, I should probably do that bit first, shouldn't I? I'm Dan Gregory. For those who don't know me, I work for Birmingham City Council in the Route to Net Zero team. So we work across the council to support all the different parts of the local authority to reach our net zero ambitions. And the majority of the work I do is within the housing teams to support the retrofit agenda and delivering retrofit programs, but also looking to the future and how we scale up retrofit across the city and regionally as well. So really important that Brett was with us today, and that we've got people feeding into this Birmingham Retrofit Summit from outside of Birmingham, because it's really important that we collaborate, we work closely together, and we learn from each other, because this is a fast-flowing agenda and we can't do it all. So I'm not going to talk much more. I think it's time that I bring in some of the questions that have been asked, and the one I'm going to start with is a fairly general question. So really opening this up to anybody who wants to put their hand up, at any of the panel members who want to put their hand up, is a question that's been asked, and I think very, very appropriate, is should skills programs and capacity building and the whole careers pathway be localized, or should a regional approach be taken? And how can we ensure that local authorities across the region collaborate better in developing the supply chain? So is there anyone who wants to put their hand up for that one, or shall I pick on someone? No, I'm going to go for Brett. Come on, Brett.
I thought you might say that. Yeah, I think the answer is it's both. In fact, there's some things where we've got economies of scale where you could get certain organisations around the table for training, where you've got to do it at a kind of regional level for things to work. And I can sort of think of things like some of the work that we've been doing on retrofit with ourselves, looking at clearly like the retrofit academy and what role it plays. At the moment we haven't really connected with that, but that would operate more at a regional level. And Dyson Energy as well tends to be more than just Coventry. But then you have the really important links around, for example, we have a contractor who delivers our social housing decarbonisation fund, and now that contractor has really signed up to training in a big way, and they've set up their own training facility. They run apprenticeships and work closely with us and the college, and it's our local networks within the city that are kind of working for that. And the fact that we've got a Green Skills partnership and a Green Skills group helps to support that. And so really, in effect, it's both. It's local for all the local connectivity and all the connections and opportunities that we create locally, but also we need to connect at a larger scale for particularly some of the bigger organisations in terms of creating those sort of bigger opportunities that might exist there, and also to make sure that we complement each other. So if we're providing certain types of training, we've got specialisms in one area. You know, we're in the Midlands, we're not too far from one another. It might be an opportunity for people to get some very specialist training at a particular venue which is geared up for it. And it can't be replicated everywhere else because of the cost. So therefore you make it accessible for everyone. And there's that sort of getting that mix as well. So some of the general skills, but also the specialist skills, which maybe only be provided by one or two institutions, which might be not close to us. So we need to be connected with them in order to make sure that people get those benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally agree, Brett. Thank you. Martin, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think Brett has nailed it. I would say the combined authority has an important role to play. A lot of the skills funding flows through the combined authority, and there is a need for a joined up plan. I think that best happens at the combined authority level. But Brett is absolutely right that actually each college training organisation know their patch best and how to engage with the retrofit program. So the National Centre has this ambition that what we do is take people from communities which are engaged in the retrofit program, train them up. And so it's people from those communities which are delivering the solutions back to those communities. So you're addressing at the same time the unemployment challenges that some communities face, together with this opportunity to lift the housing stock and improve fuel poverty. So, you know, I think it's important that you have both ends of those activities playing out.
Right, thank you. But important, as Brett says, that we collaborate and make sure we share experiences and specialize in some cases as well if we've got specialist skills training providers, etc. So really good points. Thank you. Does anyone else want to add to that question before we move on? John?
Yeah, I concur with what the Martin and Brett have said. I think my experience is the importance of actually engaging at a very localized level as well. So how do we take the plan at a strategic plan at a sort of combined authority level and communicate and the engagement work required then at a very localized level to get people interested over and above, you know, the ways that you know, the colleges and the training providers recruit currently. You know, what we are finding, I think I said in my piece, was that, you know, in our survey work, we had about 50 odd people plus who were interested in the work in some sort of career in it. So is that the first time they've said that, or have they engaged with colleges? You know, we've got to do some more work on that. So yeah, you know, strategically that's fine, but how does that sort of manifest itself then at a very localized level in terms of engagement and outreach?
Thanks, John. I think whilst following on from that, I will pick up on another question that I was going to come to later, but I think that response that you've had to your questionnaires, the really high level of the responses said that people may be interested in retrofit careers, which is fascinating. What I'd be really keen to know, and this kind of sort of feeds into Madhu's points as well, so maybe but the two of you can respond on this. What I'm really keen to know is how do we make sure we capture that interest going forward? How do we ensure that our supply chain captures that interest and takes it from being an interest to actually long-term careers? And Madhu, from how do we ensure that those opportunities are made available to all our communities?
Yeah,
do you want to start? Oh, go on, Madhu.
I can jump in there.
Yeah.
So just to say that actually, I think often people feel that these sort of careers are out of reach for them, or often they can't actually get to the training that they need to get to. So it's about taking that whole systems approach to make sure that they are able to first sort of access in terms of applications or whatever the process is, that it's as accessible as possible to people. And then beyond that, that they are able to actually get to the training, or that it's tailored to make it easy for them to be able to gain the skills. So the requirements to get onto courses or the support to get to the places is available so that they can actually access them, because yeah, that can be a barrier, but also sometimes there's just a internal barrier for communities where they feel that they can't actually do something for a reason that is they just don't feel like necessarily that these careers are viable for them. So it's about sort of showing people examples and showing them that it is a possibility for them. So I guess the thing that comes to mind is sometimes people say you can't be what you can't see, and sort of highlighting those examples can be really, really helpful. Yeah.
I love that quote. I may use that in the future. I'll have to steal it. John, have you got anything to add to that?
No, not really. Other than to say that you know, what we've got is often an untapped market because of a lack of awareness of what the opportunities are, you know, and the breadth of the opportunities as well. You know, whether that is an assessor right through to someone, you know, in a more broader green skills. And it's also seeing it in stages. So the first stage might be a boot camp, or it might be a CS card, really. They can enter that. So they're not going to become, you know, when you look at the capacity requirements, they're not going to come people at the top of the tree straight away in some cases. So let's get them in at, get them in, if I can keep the analogy, with the roots, really. And that route could be the CS card, really, or a skills boot camp, you know, of which there are many out there as well, or even just knowing a little bit more about it. And often with these things, you know, you're on about the work that Brett is doing within the schools. As I said to Brett, through my knowledge of that school, you know, you were teaching the kids in terms of, you know, hard hats and how they go home to their parents and say what this is happening and save money, and then somehow the discussion might come around the skills. So it's a bit of a journey, Dan, in that sense.
Sure.
You know, broader awareness, financial inclusion, jobs. It needs to be seen in all the same package, really.
Great, thanks, John. And you mentioned Brett and the work that they're doing in Coventry around schools. Another question that came up is around engaging with primary schools. So helping with changing the family behaviours right from the primary school age. Is that something you're working on, Brett, or is it something you plan?
Yeah, no, it's that we just ran the pilot at St Gustin's School. We've got some work going on with Eon with National Energy Action, which is at secondary school, which is maybe more skills oriented. But I think the really important thing, the thing that's often missing, is that try and give children skill sets, help teach science and everything else, using a very practical issue like insulation, which is a thing in science, but actually applying it to something that's really practical and valuable and useful for families. But at the same time, the bit that's often missing with these programs is it's about raising the children's awareness. So what we're trying to engineer is something which actually engages the parents in the process as well. And I think that's critical in what we do, because actually the climate change is an issue that we have to address now. It's not the children of the future. Actually, it's about harnessing child power and child pressure to get the present generations to do something, and I think that's really important. So what we're trying to do with this is actually develop something that is a kind of something that we don't have to go individually to schools. So there's a pack that teachers can use of resources, so including activities that the children can do at home with their parents. So it's kind of like a learning experience, so they could do practical surveys with the parents, bring back information, hopefully raise awareness and affect behavior change that way.
Great, thanks, Brett. And Alex, you had your hand up. Do you want to add anything, or I do have a question for you if not?
It was just on parts of the previous bits. A lot of the costs when we're looking at training and developing the training throughout the industry, the apprenticeships are coming forward. A lot of people, there is this misunderstanding that apprenticeships mean just people straight out of school, but apprenticeships can be taken at any stage in life. But the problem that actually generally exists is when upskilling or changing or doing any form of training, even if the funding is there for free courses, people don't have necessarily the time and the resources to do it. And that's where the difference is with the combined authorities and the local involvement, is quite often in our industry, people are self-employed, and if they're going on a course, they're still losing income. So irrelevant of the amount that course costs, they still lose significant income. And that's a bit that does need to be addressed. And also that holistic approach. Quite often we find that when we're working with families, the approach there is a bit of the approach in terms of understanding the physics, but it's actually the end game, the holistic, what it delivers in terms of the health and well-being, the impact that it has more. We'll see the stuff that's coming out of Wales and the tie together between the impact on the local NHS and the improvement of buildings. And I think that's where we need to start getting that focus that can work both with the local and the regional areas, as they can start to offset and understand costs across areas, not just within construction, but across the wider community interests.
That's really interesting. I think that point around loss of income for individuals is the same for loss of income for smaller businesses. So their incentive to train their people sometimes depends on the knowledge that those people will then have long-term, will create income for them in the longer term. So it's challenging for smaller businesses to actually give people the time to train, because they know that they're losing income by doing so. So we need to find a way around that as well. So it's a really good point. So that kind of leads into the question I was going to ask anyway, which is more around your Trustmark role. How do you suggest that we support local SMEs to prepare to capture the investment that will come with the scaling up of retrofit across the region? Councillor Thompson talked about capturing investment locally. So how do we help SMEs to do that?
Generally, a lot of SMEs and a lot around don't really understand the benefits for what there is for them, because quite often the numbers that people look at are big scale numbers. There's no obvious route for them to get, what does that mean to me? What's the impact on me personally or on my company? How can I equate that to anything that is usable or functional? And where's my return on investment? Because fundamentally, that's what it comes down to. Their return. If they're going to invest in training and upskilling and get involved in that, where is it? So outlining a whole course of, we're doing this over the next 5 to 10 years, therefore we need this number of people to come into it. Therefore, each of these people could have this amount of the pot, and this is why we're helping to bring them along. That's just the start, because actually showing them that journey shows them that actually what you can do now is open up. And it's not just here, we are catalyzing it here, but actually look at what's happening elsewhere. You will now be able to take those skills and transfer them outside this area, outside your local environment. And it's that, it's most of the issues in the industry are down to people not understanding, because the communication isn't correct. The communication and the information for them at their level is not there. So we can have these big scale programs, brilliant.
Yeah.
No, that's just going to be taken by the major players.
Yeah.
So I'll ignore all of that. And it's that understanding, that translation from that individual level the whole way up through to what the project is delivering, that quite often it's that piece that is missing that gives them the confidence to go forward.
Fantastic. That's really insightful, and has obviously raised some interest. Martin, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Dan, I think the City Council has a really important role to play here. So Alex is absolutely right. This is really complex space, and how do small companies get into a challenging area where you've got lots of regulation, standards, etc. How do they navigate that? So we do have some things around which can support. So ourselves, the University of Birmingham, we run with the Energy Systems Catapult Climate Innovation Platform. And we have had a stack of businesses in the housing retrofit side of things who innovative products, really interested in working with local authorities around trialing out and testing their solutions. And that's where the City Council can come in. You've got a stack of housing stock, which could be used to build confidence or understanding of these new products as they're coming through into market. And just as we were hearing around Venti, so being able to play back to the market the experience that the City Council has had around these new innovations. So I think it's about collaboration, as you were describing earlier. So how can we use existing platforms, work in collaboration to create these pathways?
Great, thanks, Martin. And Madhya.
I just wanted to pick up on a point that Alex made there and just sort of echo it really around sort of the translation of information. So actually that's something that exists as Alex highlighted in the SME world. So, you know, so that translation of information and getting it to the right level, it actually can be quite challenging, but that also exists on the individual level, which is why you don't see that uptake of sort of courses from ethnic minority groups or underrepresented groups, because actually in the case of SMEs, it's that cost that they have to do to sort of, they don't have that dedicated person or resource that can then go and sort of decipher or access that information. So they're not really able to do it in the same way that larger organizations are. And it's the same on the individual level, that I guess the time cost is just too much. And so they're not necessarily taking up those opportunities. And yeah, just to sort of reflect on some of the points that were made in the last question as well, around sort of people being able to visualize those journeys and not seeing that they're going to start at sort of a high position, but actually recognizing that there is a long-term career or a long-term vision for retrofit, and that it's the beginning of something, and that doesn't necessarily have to come quite early on in your career, but actually there is opportunities to change career later on. I think I read somewhere that actually we're no longer in a position where we're going to have a career for life, but actually the way things are changing, we're going to have 2 or 3 careers throughout our lives. So sort of figuring out how we engage people at different stages of their career journey will be really, really integral to ensuring that we're able to meet the demand for skills.
That's great, Madhya. I sense that there's a need for a much longer and wider conversation about this subject. So really, very, very interesting. I'd like to just bring Ashley in, if that's all right. Ashley, a question around upskilling for people who with existing skills. Obviously, this is relevant to the Venti products, and presumably the training that you provide and that is for people who are already qualified, maybe qualified electricians. So how important is that upskilling of existing tradespeople to meeting the retrofit demand, do you think?
Yeah, it's really good, Dan. I think it's super important, because there's a whole section of new kind of skills and things that are being highlighted that are coming in that tradespeople need more of a cross section of knowledge on. And so when they might have a knowledge of, just in our game, for instance, they might have knowledge of being able to fit a basic vent, but then if they can have the knowledge of how to fit other ventilation, how the ventilation plays a part in the retrofit measures, any knowledge like that across the whole spectrum, right from not just the people installing it, but the people using it, the people specifying it. There's a whole, and I think we see a big lack in ventilation particularly, and it would be the same in lots of other sectors, that we haven't come on enough a journey yet. We're having to learn fast, and us as an SME are entrant into a marketplace which some would have said was saturated already, but actually you find that there isn't enough information and skills and knowledge and training being disseminated, and we've all got to learn quickly. And we've not only got to learn quickly about our individual areas of expertise, but how those individual areas of expertise dovetail into all of the other measures, because there are unintended consequences being mentioned a lot, and we have to work holistically. And so it's important that all of us have a cross section of knowledge, and how each one of each measure dovetails in with another. Otherwise, we won't have a cohesive, joined up approach. And that's what we're seeing, particularly in ventilation in this country. Generally across the board, we're very behind. When you look at countries like Germany and particularly other European countries, we're very behind the curve in ventilation. We spent a lot of time on other measures for numbers of years, which have actually put ventilation backwards. And so the journey to spotlighting that, in our view, is really important, and that's one of the things that we're doing.
Sure.
A lot of work on.
That's great, Ashley. Thank you. I think Madhu and Alex have both talked about messaging in some of their comments, and it feels at the moment that retrofit within the whole construction industry is not the sexiest thing. It's kind of, new build is far sexier. So how with this is and then within retrofit, it's probably fair to say, no offense, that ventilation is probably not up there with solar panels or new windows as the sexy measure. So how do we start to change that? And I guess that comes down to messaging and kind of changing how people see things. And I really liked in your video the case studies, and I think those make a difference. I think seeing those case studies and seeing how people's lives have been changed through ventilation is really helpful. So I really appreciated that. I'm going to bring Alex. Sorry, Ashley, go ahead.
So one of the questions I think we have as an organisation, and I'll be glad of others' thoughts as well, particularly yourselves, is how we bring all of the stakeholders into the conversation. Because I've said to many, it seems like the landlords, the social housing companies, and all of that get quite a bad rap for things like poor ventilation and mold growth and that sort of thing. Whereas actually, it's really clear that the residents know why these things happen and what they can do to prevent them as well. And I think it's key that the messaging gets out there to the right people at all levels, so that we're not just trying to pin these problems on one party or another, but that there is an understanding across the board about it.
Right. Yeah. Alex.
Yeah, I mean, just on what you've just been asking about, actually, the 2 points are fundamentally linked together. And it's an issue that retrofit we're trying to change in retrofit leadership. And that is, ventilation isn't there for the simple reason that this is all around energy. And the biggest issue with retrofit is this single-minded focus on energy. Ventilation is not an energy measure. But if you look at things like PAS 2035, ventilation is the first step for any retrofit. And it's because we've got to focus on energy. We should be focusing instead on the health and well-being of our occupants, both mental and physical. Being unable to pay the bills is a massive mental stress. Being uncomfortable in our homes is a physical stress. It's all linked together. If we have a higher purpose and higher focus, all these items come together. Would you rather buy a home that costs a bit more to run each year, or one which protects the health of your children and your family? What's the sexy appeal? Why do you buy a home? You buy a home in a certain location because of its proximity to your work, to your shops, and to your children's and families' schools and education establishments. That's the general reason that people buy. It's around family. It's family decisions. And yet we focus all of the retrofit market for some reason around energy. If we focus it around family and we focus it around occupants, people might be able to help sort of make those decisions more easily. We can help them in that way. The difference that retrofit makes is actually on the health and well-being of the occupant, not just the energy. The energy is part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Alex. Thank you. Brett.
Yeah, thanks, Alex, for that, because this relates to what I call around fair transition. What we're finding is that the most disadvantaged people are actually getting a double hit, because often work isn't done on their property because it's not eligible for the funding because it's a ventilation issue, and I think really a lot of the fault lies with government and the lack of coordination. So I have a housing enforcement team who deal with housing conditions, and we're trying to align with them, but the funding streams that they've got available are very limited. We're just doing a pilot in Foes Hill with the 2 worst super output areas in the city. That's like just a tip of the iceberg. And we look at the private rented sector in particular. There's some real issues around that, those housing conditions, and the relationship between the 2. So in fact, Birmingham and Coventry and Citizen Housing have bought into this and said we want every house to be involved in this, but we just got a bid because Coventry is a member of the National Institute of Health Social Care Research. We're actually seen as a research foundation in our own right, so we can apply for research funding as a university does, and we work with universities. In this instance, it's the University of Birmingham. Professor Jean Bauchy is really interested in indoor air quality, And we're trying to do a project which links looking at our retrofit work and activity and how it affects indoor air quality, condensation, damp, and other things as well, and also indoor pollutants. And I think that's going to be really critical. That's going to give us some really critical information nationally to apply in housing. And just keep my fingers crossed we get the grant. This is about £7.5 million programme involving quite a few authorities in the West Midlands. I think Birmingham, Coventry, and then some of the smaller ones in the more rural areas are involved. But I think it's that kind of thing is really key, and there is a lack of coordination that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, good point, Brett. Thank you. And Madhya.
Yeah, so what seems to be coming up quite often in the conversations that we're having is around sort of coming at it from multiple different approaches. And I guess that's where inclusive growth comes in, because it sort of takes a very sort of holistic approach and looks at not just sort of retrofit as an energy problem or a climate change issue. It actually looks at it from a holistic point of view and how that links to, sort of how our communities feel, how connected we are, the health and well-being of our places. So we sort of tend to look at any problem we try to at the combined authority level from sort of 8 lenses, but we can summarize them quite nicely into 3, which is people, place, and planet. And I think what Alex talked about around health and well-being is very, very important, because ultimately the purpose is that people feel safe, secure, and healthy in their homes. And it's about how we make sure, and that brings in the other sort of eight lenses that we look at it from, that are the sort of breakdown of how you achieve that, essentially, which I sort of covered in my presentation earlier. But yeah, definitely agree that when you put the focus on people and sort of how they feel in their homes and their health and well-being, I think that's the really sort of should be the key focus.
I think that message is a great takeaway from today's session. So yeah, thank you all for contributing to that. We are running over. I'm happy to continue for another 10 minutes. Obviously, if any of the panel members need to drop off, totally understand that and very much appreciate your input. But
Dan, sorry to interrupt. We're scheduled until 11:45, so you've got at least 10 minutes.
10 minutes, yeah. Okay, fine. Thank you. So I'm going to move on to a question for Martin. That's come from the audience. Fairly straightforward. How do local businesses get involved in the new decarbonisation or heat centre, or centre for decarbonised heat?
And it may be very straightforward answer in the sense of just send me an email. Very happy to engage and explore how to integrate. I did briefly mention so Brett has just mentioned one bid which is going in from University of Birmingham. There is another bid which is around the green economy, or accelerating the green economy. We're bidding for a centre which would be dedicated to housing retrofit. It has a whole series of programs, packages associated with it. One is supporting innovation, and so that's working with businesses and helping them navigate the barriers to this sector. Another is called communities of practice. And those communities of practice are looking at all sorts of issues, so building standards and regulations, and that involves BRE, looking at the housing sector and the market, trying to understand how to navigate that, green finance, and how to draw green finance into this sector, public health, which has got Zongbo involved in that, and the role of local government in this sector, and then scaling. So there's lots of areas that we're going to focus on. So these communities of practice are a chance for organisations to come along and contribute to the thinking. The perhaps overly ambitious plan is to come up with a playbook for housing retrofit. So we're going to focus on the authorities that we have in the region. So it stretches from Coventry to Birmingham, and take learning from that, and that then will scale nationally. So send me an email.
Great, thanks, Martin. I think just to kind of build on that, I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to work. Well, we will be working with Martin going forward. But I think somebody else raised a question. I haven't got it in front of me, but it was something around Councillor Thompson's comment about a network being developed for retrofit across the city. That's something that isn't in place yet, but we will be putting in place with the network events to allow different people from across the retrofit industry, shall we say, to come together. We'll be organising presentations from different people too, and so that will be starting in the next few months. But I very much hope that Martin will come along and speak to us at one of those as well. And just a bit of a follow on, Martin, again, quite a specific question from Nigel Lloyd. Would the National Centre for Decarbonisation of Heat find a space in their plans for a local community energy co-op?
Well, Nigel already knows the answer to this. The National Centre is at Tyseley, and Nigel has been using some of the space at Tyseley already. So yes, we want to make sure that every organisation that sees an opportunity to be involved and wants to co-locate can be. We'll run out of space eventually, but first come, first served at the moment.
Right. Going back to Madhya, again, question from someone on the session. How does the inclusive growth framework work with individual local authorities? Are they expected to adopt the same approach, or is this, and does the CA provide resources to support with that? What's the thoughts from the CA around that?
So at the moment, the inclusive growth framework is something that we're refreshing. We have engaged with local authority partners, and sort of the uptake from different local authority partners is different. And that's purely because some local authorities have that dedicated resource. So for example, Solihull engages quite often with us, but we do talk to the sort of people who work on, I guess, inclusive growth or similar because local authorities sometimes call it something slightly different. We do engage with them, but if there is anybody from a local authority who would like to sort of get in touch and talk to us more about inclusive growth, we would be more than willing to do that. And you can just drop me an email. But yeah, it sort of varies across the sort of 7 Met area, with some places sort of having a greater uptake, and sort of other places having a slightly different way that they implement inclusive growth.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Madhya. I do have a question here that's not directly, excuse me, related to skills and capacity, but I think it's an important question, and certainly one that came up briefly yesterday, and I've had a number of conversations with different people around this. I can't remember who wrote this one, but there's lots of grant funding available for retrofitting social housing and housing for people on low incomes. There's also support for the able to pay market, but there's the vast quantity of properties across Birmingham and nationally are those people who kind of sit in that void between grant funded programs and being able to pay for their own retrofit measures. So the question is, when are we likely to see funding available, and if not funding, what other approaches are being taken and can be taken to help bridge this gap for those people who really need it but are unable to access funding? So is there anyone on the call willing to take that question? Excellent, Alex, thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Actually, it's the problem here is actually the misnomer of able to pay. Able to pay is someone that doesn't actually fit into the bottom category in terms of the SHDF or other schemes, and you've got things like the Great British Installation Scheme. That is a fully funded scheme, certain amounts of installation, etc. Yes, it's not working fully at the moment in terms of what it needs to deliver, but that should be delivering free installations for all of those lines. So there are elements out there. I think there needs to be a fair bit more work from regional and local authorities to provide the amount of information to make the argument within government as to the scale of the issue. And I think that's where a lot of the issues are missing at the moment, because that next tier up effectively counts as able to pay. And I think it might be helpful to start to highlight, actually, we have different tiers of classifications of people that we really need to help that don't fall into or fall out of the current schemes that we really need to help focus. And I think that's where things do need to change, is saying we want to be able to direct that money to a certain degree where it needs to go, rather than just a general overarching scheme such as GBIS which is just available and people need to submit with an unknown amount of information, etc. But no, the scheme does exist. It's out there, but it is this misnomer that effectively you've got all these schemes for all these different areas underneath, and then you've just got able to pay, covers everything else.
Yeah.
And it does cover those areas that have been mentioned in the question, but it's not sufficient enough for it.
I agree. I think yes, the able to pay market. Well, it's the wrong terminology to start with. I don't like the term personally at all. And I think there's other better terms, but also there's that suggests that fairly small part of our communities who have the means to actually fund their own retrofit. What we also need to be considering is finance for those people who don't have means. So it might not be funding, but private finance and how that works. And those conversations are happening. We talked yesterday with Becky Lane from Ferb Now, whose focus was the able to pay market, but that has broadened now to recognizing exactly this question, that there's a much bigger part of our communities who are not yet or not able to claim any sort of grants. They can't be part of funded programs, so that they need to be supported in some way. I don't think there's a solution as yet, but certainly those conversations are starting to happen. I think we have one more question, and we literally have 1 minute left. So I think this is a really good one to wrap up with, from James Lee. How do we expect the demand for retrofit skills changing in the next 2 to 5 years, and do we anticipate a skills shortage? So, no, I'm not going to try and answer that. I'm going to pass that out to other people. So, we've done a lot of work in Birmingham around skills and understanding the potential gaps. But let's ask it for other people's input first. Anybody? Brett, have Coventry got any views on this?
Well, there's that fair transition element. So what happens to all the gas fitters and all those people who are currently working in the fossil fuel related industries, about how they shift? And that will be quite a significant shift for some of those individuals in terms of moving, say, from installing gas boilers to look at heat pumps. Very different scenario. Are they the best place to do that, or will that be a different group of people? So that's something as well. It's about looking at the skill sets that are there and what are they best able to transfer to into. Now, they might not have the same skill sets as what the others might be better suited to, but they might be the ones that people have always turned to in the past to provide indoor sort of central heating, for example. So I think it's going to be a need to focus on that. And also, I think that, yeah, we are going to get some skill shortages in certain areas. It's certainly something that we're in the college. I mean, we put some bids in for the college for kit, for example, to do training around heat pumps and how to use them, and get sort of that. We've done that with electric vehicles. So it's going to be need for colleges to have the kit, and the real problem for colleges is getting the staff to train people, because they're the money that they can pay normal lecturers to deliver this is nowhere near enough in comparison to what if someone was doing that in the real world in the marketplace. So there needs to be some recognition from government in terms of funding for training provision in these areas, that actually they need to be able to upgrade the people that are training in these areas, because otherwise they're not going to be able to recruit people to do the training in the first place. So I think that's a real key. Those are some of the key issues I think we're going to be facing.
Okay, thanks, Brett. Anybody else got views on the coming shortage, skills shortage? No. Okay. Oh, Alex.
Yeah, I'll just go. There's a fair bit of skills shortage already. I've noticed that government are playing on that side as it is. But as we look at specifically at retrofit, we've got apprenticeships that are coming forward and new definitions for each of the areas to really help that going forward. But the biggest issue is demand, and that demand is set by policy and where it's going. We've got the confusion as it stands on the policy, and this is where I think the regional and local parties are going to have to push forward. Is when you look at national policy, a number of months ago, we had Labour saying there's going to be £6 billion a year funding in this arena, and then that was slashed. There is still funding coming forwards. There are things going forwards, but it's that certainty to work in the sector is the biggest problem. And unless those environments local to people can give them certainty of work, we're going to be going up and down a bit like a yo-yo for the next couple of years.
100%, I agree with that. This is exactly the finding that we've from the skills work that we've done, and in terms of both the investment by the supply chain, but also the investment by the universities and colleges to put on the courses that are needed to upskill people. That longer term thinking is needed, and not the longer term certainty that, as you say, Alex, which is extremely important. Fantastic. I think that's a great place to finish. Once again, thank you all so much for joining us today. I think it's been really interesting chat. Your presentations were great, and then this conversation has been extremely interesting. And thanks to everybody who's on the call. We had a lot of people on the call today, so from all sorts of different organisations. So fantastic to see you all here. And we will, if we have missed any questions, apologies. I hope I've got through everything, but we'll try and respond if not. So I think that only leaves me to say thanks for coming. Thanks for all the panel members, and to Graham and Sophie for organising the event so well, and all the team behind Low Carbon Homes as well.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
thanks Dan, and yeah, thanks all our speakers. Dan, just stay there for a sec, because thank you, speakers. Just turn your camera and mic off, and it will disappear off from the screen, and I'll just sort of wrap up. But Dan, I just wanted to give you the floor just to explain a little bit more about your session on Thursday. As part of Retrofit Action Week, we've got a special session that we couldn't actually squeeze into this program, so I thought it's a great moment to just share a little bit about that.
Thank you. That's great. I get to talk again. So I'm actually doing a plug for it in tomorrow's session. But through delivering the recent retrofit programs that the council's been responsible for, so including SHDF and the Sustainable Warmth competition, we learned a massive amount. And the things that didn't go brilliantly were mainly around communication. So we were working with some of our community groups, and one of the contractors who delivered Sustainable Warmth with us. We've been developing a digital platform to support communication and to massively improve the customer journey for the homeowner or resident. So it's a platform that aids that communication for all parties, that all parties can access. So it's one version of the truth, and the end user, the homeowner, can actually see exactly where they are in the retrofit program. So we have an hour session on Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock to really explore that further, actually do a live demo of the platform and get everybody's thoughts. It is in use. It is already being used. We've been developing it over the last 4 or 5 months with a SME tech company, and we will be presenting it tomorrow, and would love people's feedback on it. It's still very early days, and so I'd like to get as much feedback as possible. Brilliant, great. So that's one of the events within Retrofit Action Week. So go onto that hub. There's a link in the chat, or there will be again soon, and you can follow the links through there, as well as all the other sessions coming up across the week. So great sharing, Dan.